today we are going to look at the feeding of the 5,000. We thought we'd look at that story. But before we start, and I read it out, if you want to find it in your Bibles, you can. It's Mark 6, verse 30. But before we start, I just want to give a little background to the story. Because a couple of things happened just before this miracle happened. So the first thing that happened was Jesus had sent his disciples out in pairs, and they had just got back from what they'd been doing. So it says in Mark 6, verse 12 to 13, so they went out and proclaimed that people should repent, and they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. So they've just come back from doing all of that to find Jesus. The other massive thing that has just happened is John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, has just been killed. So we're going to be thinking about those two things as we read the passage. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he, Jesus, went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go out and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said 5, and 2 fish. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up to the mountain to pray. So right at the start, we have Jesus and the disciples trying to take a bit of time out. The disciples want to tell Jesus all about what they've done and what's happened. But at the same time, John, who they've all known, has died. And they just want a bit of time out, a bit of time away from everybody. Just to have that moment of grief, that moment of sharing, that moment of time. But the people don't allow it. And it says, and we have the need. It says, when Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. The people came to find him, and not just small amounts. We're told that the crowd had 5,000 in it of men, and that doesn't count women and children. When he got to the other side of the lake, they were already there waiting for him, because they wanted to hear what he was going to tell them next. They wanted to see more of Jesus. And rather than saying, "Do you know what? I'm not in the mood. Actually, today I'm not going to go there. I just want some time out." Jesus looks at them and he sees sheep without a shepherd. He sees that they need someone to lead them, to guide them, to teach them. In Matthew 14, the same story says, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. He spent time healing their sick as well. And I love that he says, he taught them many things. Wouldn't you love to know what those two words, many things, were? And he must have been really engaging, because they sat there and listened for what seems like or sounds like hours on end, to the point where it was getting dark and they were all hungry. And that comes to the challenge. It says, when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late." They've got no food. I seem to have missed that bit off the verse. But the disciples come to him and say, "It's late and it's desolate and people are hungry. They need to go home. What are we going to do?" And we know that there's 5,000 men there. We know that there will have been women and children as well, so it will have been many, many more people. And they're all beginning to get hungry because they've been sat listening to Jesus for a long while. So the disciples' solution is actually very practical. Let's send them away into the surrounding countryside and the villages and let them buy themselves something to eat. To them, that seems like the perfect solution. There would have been villages nearby. They could have gone and bought food. Whether they'd have had enough for the amount of people that were there, I have no idea. But they could have gone in and done that. But Jesus' solution is a bit different, isn't it? He says, you give them something to eat. Remember, these disciples have just been sent out. They've just been away doing all these amazing, miraculous things. So Jesus says to them, you give them something to eat. And their answer is, that would take more than half a year's wages. That would take 200 denarii. That's far more than we can do. We can't do this. We can't go and spend that much money on bread and give it to them to eat. They can just see it as an impossible task. So Jesus then asks his next question, which is, how many loaves do you have? And I'm quite proud of this, because I made these rolls in my bread maker. It's not as amazing as it sounds, but I'm still quite proud of it. So, 5 rolls, 2 fishes. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you just stand there and hold these just for a moment? I didn't make the fish, and I didn't bring real ones. I don't do fish. So I'm guessing these rolls were actually bigger than the ones they had. And if you read some of the stories, they were a little boy's lunch that he'd been sent with that he obviously hadn't eaten. I think about this, and I think about my boys and the young people that I work with, and they're always hungry. And thinking about the fact they sat there and they listened to Jesus and didn't eat the food they'd been given says they must have been totally engaged with what he was saying and not feeling any hunger at all. But that was what they had, those 5 loaves and those 2 fishes to feed everyone. That's what they bring back to him. Jesus could have said to them, rather than how many loaves are there, he could have just provided manna, a bit like happened in the Old Testament in Exodus. He could have gone, do you know what, actually, we'll just provide everything. I'll just ask God and it'll come. But he involves his disciples. He's teaching them something. He wants to get them involved. He wants them to partner with him in this miracle so that they can see what he can do. And Jesus' solution to the problem is to feed everybody. His solution is to actually sit them down and feed them all. And as you read this story, there's some really big similarities to the Psalm of the Good Shepherd. So we're going to just have a look at that. And I have given out to the young people, well, Paul has for me, they've all got Psalm 23, the Lord's Shepherd. I'm afraid it's not on a slide, but I'm going to read it out. And what we're going to do is look at some of those similarities. And what I'm going to be asking the young people to do, and adults, if you want to find Psalm 23, is we're going to have a look at what happens in Mark, and then how that shows us something about the Good Shepherd in Psalm 23. So, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters, and he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up the verse from Mark 6, verse 34. So we've got Jesus teaches the people. What I'd like my young people and the adults to do, and young people, we've still got sweets available, so you can earn them. What I want you to do is find, and this is probably the hardest one, find a bit in Psalm 23 that links to Jesus teaching the people. So I will say that this is probably the hardest there. What does the Good Shepherd do in 23 that links? Have we got any ideas? Go for it, Callum. Yes, I'm coming. Oh, Paul's got it. So, yes, he leads me in the path of righteousness. Exactly. How do we know what the way of the righteous is? He leads us. Jesus began to teach them many things. We have to be taught. We have to find out about them. For us, we find out about the path of righteousness through reading our Bible, through guidance from the Holy Spirit. But for them at that time, it was about Jesus teaching them what that path of righteousness was. So he started by teaching them. And then we have our next one. Jesus sits the people down. So it says in Mark 6, verse 39 to 40, then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. What's the verse in Psalm 23 that goes with that? Tim, your hand is there. I can see it. Shout really loud, Tim. Yes, exactly. He makes me lie down in green pastures. I want to just point out there as well, he doesn't it says he commands the people to sit down. And in Psalm 2, he says he makes me lie down. Okay? Sometimes we need God to tell us to do something. Or in that case, they needed Jesus to tell them to do something. They needed him to command them to do it, not kind of go, well, if you feel like it, you could. They needed him to say, right, sit down. Let's give you what you need, but first, sit down. Next one. Jesus feeds the people. So Mark 6, verse 41 says, and taking the 5 fish and the 2 loaves, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. And he broke the loaves and he gave them to the disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. What have we got from Psalm 23 for that one? Benji. Is it you prepare a table before me? It is. Very good. You prepare a table before me. Notice that the first thing Jesus does is he gives thanks for the food. He blesses it. He asks God to bless what he's doing. And then he gives it to the disciples to hand out. Just imagine what's going through the disciples' heads as they start handing out this bread, and it just keeps going and going and going. I know over the years I've heard different stories of different people tell me that not for feeding 5,000, but they've been in situations where they've had a pot of food and they just didn't think it was going to be enough, and it's just kept going and going and going. But I just imagine being the disciples at that point and just continuing to hand it out and continuing to see it go further and further. And obviously all the people sat there, and the children and the women all saw it too. They saw these small 5 loaves and these 2 fish get multiplied so that they were all feeding off this food. What an amazing miracle God does for them all. They eat until they are full. Mark 6, verse 42, and they all ate and were satisfied. Verse from Psalm 23. Oh, Rowanna's got it. Yes, my cup overflows. He gives them everything they need at that point. They could have just had a little bit, couldn't they? Just enough to get them to the next village or the next place. But no, they get enough so that they're full, so that they're satisfied, so that they've got enough. And then they don't want, like it says in the psalm. This miracle shows not just the miraculousness of God and the wow factor, but also his care and his compassion towards them. The fact that actually he wants to look after them and he wants them to be full and he wants them to have what they need. Okay, final one. Leftovers. Mark 6, verse 33, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Where does that fit from Psalm 23, verse 5? I'm opening this out to adults because children aren't going there. Lorna's got a hand up. It is. Yeah, because I misread it last time and it should have been I shall not want last time. But my cup overflows fits. So, yeah, it is. Okay, yeah, so it shows God's generosity. Shows that he gives them all they need and more. And as I said before, it talked about the men. If you read Matthew 14, verse 21, it says there were 5,000 women and 5,000 men and women and children. This miracle points out that Jesus, again, is for everyone. He doesn't leave anybody out. And I love that the children got to see this firsthand as well. I love that this was a story they got to tell people, and they were there, and they were involved. They got to be part of it too. And then finally, the verses say, and there isn't a part of the psalm for this, but to close the day, Jesus dismisses the crowd and sends them on their way. And then he leaves everybody, and he goes up the mountain to pray. He finishes where he started. He goes back to what he wanted to do originally. He goes up the mountain to pray on his own and spend time with his Father. So I just want to think about that line there. You give them something to eat. What do we have that God can create a miracle out of? What does God want to do through us? What we see in this story is the disciples miss the point. They do that a lot, but they miss the point once again. As I said before, they've just been away doing amazing miracles, and yet when Jesus asks the question, says to them, it's not even a question, is it? It's, you give them something to eat. Their instant reaction is, well, that can't happen, that can't be done, that's not possible. They kind of miss the opportunity. But then Jesus allows them to be involved anyway. He gets them involved. Even though they didn't have the faith to see that God could feed all the people in front of them. It's that question, isn't it? How many loaves do you have? Go and see. Go and find out. What do you have? If we have the faith, we have the resources Jesus needs to use us. And it's really easy sometimes to think, but I'm tired, or I don't have time, or I don't have the finances, or I don't have the resources for this. And yet actually, Jesus knows exactly what we do have. And I think he simply asks, well, okay, you don't have those things, but what do you have? It might just be 5 rolls and 2 fish to feed 5,000 people. But I'm here with you. I'll create the miracle. You have the faith. We sang before, actually, in the worship, we sang King of Kings, and it says in that, "Your Majesty, I can but bow. I lay my all before you now." And I was just thinking as we were singing that, yeah, it's about that, isn't it? It's going, I might not have much, but I'm laying it before you and saying, God, do something with it. Help me use it to serve you. If you go on in the story, after they feed the 5,000 and Jesus has gone up his mountain and he's sent the disciples away and he's sent the crowds away, the next thing that happens is the disciples go in the boat again. I don't know why the disciples get in boats, if I'm honest. Everything goes wrong regularly if they get in a boat, apart from the time they first met Jesus. But even then, it's still gone wrong overnight. But they get in a boat and they go across the water, and it gets stormy. And there's a big wind, and they're not really making any progress. And it's when Jesus walks towards them on the water. And in Mark 6, verse 49, it says, "But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, 'Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.' And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. And they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened." Even after seeing what had just happened, again, they're astounded by what Jesus has done, because they just haven't fully got it. The disciples didn't have faith, whereas we need to put our faith in Jesus. We need to let him show us the amazing things that he can do through us. And we need to trust that Jesus can use what we've got, however much or however little it is. So I'm just going to finish by asking those questions that are on the screen. What have you got that Jesus can create a miracle out of? And what does Jesus want to do? What does he want to do through you?